The sun hung low and golden, spilling its light across the wide sweep of prairie as though the earth itself were painted in honey. Dust shimmered in the still air, and the morning carried no hurry, only the sigh of wind pushing softly against weathered wood. Simon Carver stepped out of his ranch house with a weight of silence pressing down on him heavier than the sky. His boots sank into soil that had known too many steps taken alone. Chores waited, as they always did, yet every movement felt like an echo inside an emptiness he had not learned to live with. He was 33, shoulders carved strong by work, yet his eyes carried the shadow of a man who had buried his laughter alongside the woman he once loved. The chair on the porch rocked lightly with the breeze, though no hand touched it, and Simon's gaze lingered there, caught between memory and the quiet demand of another day. He led his horse to the trough, the water rippling with each dip of the bucket. A swallow darted past, quick and careless. He envied it for that. Grief was a slow companion. It followed in silence, whispering only when the world grew too still. He had been walking with it since the earth closed over his wife's body, and though folk from town had stopped by with their stiff condolences, none stayed. None could. People spoke of healing as if it were a trail a man could simply choose to ride, but Simon knew better. Some wounds did not scab. They stayed open, raw, asking for what could never be returned. That was the frame of his mourning, a man tethered to a sorrow too stubborn to leave. Yet as he rounded the corral, his breath caught. By the fence, half collapsed against splintered wood, lay a figure. A woman, hair loose and tangled, dress torn by dust and journey. Her arms draped around two small children clinging to her, as if they were the only pieces of the world left worth holding. Simon dropped the pail, water slushing against doubt, and rushed forward. The children's eyes were wide and hollow, their cheeks pale, lips dry. The girl could not have been more than 5, the boy a year younger, both pressed against their mother with a desperation that spoke louder than words. The woman stirred when he knelt beside her. Her eyes opened, brown, clouded with fatigue yet still stubbornly alert. She tried to push herself up, failed, and whispered something barely carried by breath. "We don't mean no harm." "Easy now," Simon said, voice rough but steady. He pulled his canteen from his belt and lifted it to her lips. She turned her face slightly away, as though ashamed to drink, ashamed to take what was offered. He steadied his hand, gentled his tone. "The land'll forgive a sip of water. Don't fight it." She obeyed then, swallowing small mouthfuls as if each drop might vanish before she could claim it. The children leaned close, and Simon offered the canteen to them next. The girl's hands trembled when she lifted it, her eyes darting between him and her mother as though permission might vanish. When at last they drank, relief crossed their faces, fragile and fleeting. "What's your name?" Simon asked. The woman hesitated. "Sarah," she whispered. "These are my little ones." She pressed her hand over the girl's head. "Leah." Then to the boy. "Henry." Simon nodded, his throat tightening at the sight. "Come with me. There's shade in the barn, and I'll fetch you food." She shook her head weakly, voice threaded with shame. "We can't trouble you." "You'll trouble me more by dying at my fence," he said. His tone carried no room for refusal, yet not unkind. "Sleep in the barn tonight. It's clean and safe." Sarah lowered her gaze, defeat and gratitude twisting together. She rose unsteadily with his help, the children gripping her hands as if afraid the earth itself might swallow her. He guided them across the yard, each step a picture burned into memory. The gaunt curve of a face, the way the children's bare feet stirred dust clouds, the fragile dignity she carried even in ruin. Inside the barn, golden dust floated in lantern light. Horses shifted, curious, but quiet. Simon laid a blanket down in the corner. Sarah's lips quivered as she whispered thanks, and her children collapsed onto the hay, exhaustion pulling them under fast. Simon lingered, his hands restless at his sides. He wanted to speak comfort, but words felt clumsy in his mouth. Instead, he left quietly, closing the door behind him, though his mind stayed inside that barn long after. That night his house seemed colder, emptier still. He sat at the table, plate untouched, listening to silence stretch between walls that once echoed with his wife's laughter. Yet faint through the stillness, from the barn, came the soft murmur of a woman's prayer and the sigh of children's sleep. For the first time in months, the loneliness in his chest shifted, not gone, but changed, as though another's presence had pressed gently against it. Morning came with the crow of a rooster and the restless stomp of hooves. Simon stepped outside to find Sarah already at the well, drawing water with careful effort, her children watching. Sunlight struck her face, revealing the depth of exhaustion there, but also something else, resolve. When she caught him looking, she lowered her gaze quickly, as though afraid he might see the shame she carried like a weight. He saddled his horse. "I need to ride into town," he said. "Come with me. Your little ones could use proper food." Her instinct was refusal. He saw it in the tightening of her mouth, the small shake of her head. Yet Leah tugged her hand, whispering of hunger too innocent to hide. Sarah swallowed hard, then nodded once. The general store sat square in the center of town, its porch lined with men who always found more comfort in talk than in work. Simon led Sarah and the children through the doors, every gaze following. The whispers began quick, threads of gossip winding fast through the air. "That's the widow Carver, isn't it? Taking in strays already." Belly buried his wife. "Look at her, ragged and shameless." Sarah heard. Her shoulders curved inward, her eyes fixed on the floorboards as though the earth could open and hide her. Leah clutched her mother's skirt, Henry pressed against her side. Simon's jaw tightened. He moved closer, his voice steady and low. "Don't mind their tongues. Dust blows easy out here, so do words." She dared to lift her eyes then, meeting his. Gratitude shimmered faint but bright in them, like a candle flame in the dark. Days passed. Sarah helped where she could, mending Simon's worn shirts with stitches neat and patient, cooking simple meals that filled the air with warmth his house had not known in too long. Her children's laughter spilled into rooms once silent, their footsteps scattering shadows from corners. Simon found himself lingering more, watching moments he had thought lost to him. Leah's giggle when she fed a chicken, Henry's small hand gripping reins as Simon guided him on the horse's back. Sarah's hair loose in the wind as she hung washed clothes to dry, sunlight touching her with gentle familiarity. He never spoke of what stirred in him. His heart carried both guilt and awakening, tangled together. At night he sat with a photograph of his late wife, torn between loyalty to memory and the undeniable truth that his house no longer echoed with only grief. Sarah too wrestled with fear. She whispered to herself in the dark, wondering if she was overstaying, if safety could vanish as quick as it had appeared. Leah once asked her, "Mama, can we stay here forever?" Sarah's silence then was answer enough, uncertainty biting deep. The outside world pressed harder still. A neighbor, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, confronted Simon by the fence one afternoon. "A widow under your roof? Folks are talking, Carver. Don't sully your wife's memory." Shame burned hot across Simon's face, but he did not answer. He turned away, but the words clung like bays. Sarah overheard. That evening she told him quietly, her voice trembling with resolve, "We'll go. I won't be the reason they scorn you." She gathered her children, her dignity like armor though sorrow leaked from her eyes. Leah cried, Henry clung. Sarah reached for the barn door, but Simon stepped forward, blocking her path. His voice broke low. "I'd rather bear their gossip than your absence." She froze, eyes wide, tears shining. Silence stretched, then slowly, she let go of the door. The days after carried a new weight between them, heavy yet tender. Simon could no longer pretend indifference. One afternoon, as sun spilled golden across the yard, Leah and Henry played near the well, laughter echoing. Sarah stood nearby, her hair catching the light, her face softened by something almost like peace. Simon approached, heart pounding with words long held back. "Sarah," he began, voice rough, "I thought my heart had died with her. I thought there was nothing left of me but work and silence. But you," he faltered, breath trembling, "you brought it back to life." She turned, shock and fear warring with hope in her eyes. "I have nothing to give but myself," she whispered. "No dowry, no place in this town." Simon reached into his pocket. In his hand lay a small band of wood he had carved in quiet nights. He dropped to one knee, dust rising around him. "I don't ask for more than yourself. Will you stand with me? Will you let this place be your home?" Leah's gasp, Henry's cheer broke the moment open with joy. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling, but her nod was sure, her yes whispered yet fierce. Simon slipped the ring onto her finger, rough wood against delicate skin, and in that moment shame turned to courage, fear turned to belonging. The barn that had once sheltered strangers now held a family. The house that had echoed with grief now carried the music of children's laughter and the quiet strength of love reborn. Simon stood with Sarah's hand in his, the horizon burning with sunset, the prairie stretching endless ahead. Love, he thought, did not come like thunder. It came like dawn, slow, golden, and certain. And to those who carried sorrow like stone, it whispered the only truth that mattered. No soul was meant to walk alone. And so if you, reader, find yourself with silence heavier than walls can bear, remember this. Sometimes grace arrives not in grand gestures but in the simple mercy of opening a barn door.